Tim O'Malley with Tim Priester atop Notre Dame Stadium prior to the 90th annual Blue Gold game. Tim, we've had a few words already about Notre Dame spring practice. This is the culmination, and what are a couple things to watch for on TV, or if you are here today?
Well, it's windy up top here. It's going to be windy down there as well. So, I mean, it's basically going to be a passing day. It'll be interesting to see how the quarterbacks handle that. It'll be very interesting to see how Jonathan Dorr handles the win and how much they allow him to kick. But, I think we would like to see, we talked about this in a podcast, just the things that we saw throughout the spring. You'd like to see it validated in front of a little bit of a crowd. Throw it, catch it. Yeah. That's what they did really well this spring. That's what we can look forward to offensively today.
And I think you will see plenty of passing despite the weather. I'm sure they want to challenge both quarterbacks in these conditions. And honestly, you don't want to get all that physical in the running game against your own team. You're not going to ground and pound in these situations. But I think for a couple key guys to watch, we mentioned on our previous podcast, Phil Dracovic and Houston Griffith. Some of the younger guys, Tariq Bracy, see if he has returned to form. We'll know a little bit more about him as the summer progresses. Offensively, it's those young guys still. Wide receiver, I think people will be surprised when they see people don't know much about guys like Joe Wilkins and Lawrence Keys, and today will be their first day to shine for everyone.
Not a day for the defensive ends to shine, naturally, because the quarterbacks aren't live. So, will it be a run-heavy day? Probably later in the scrimmage, certainly in the second half, when it's generally a running clock. But I want to see how the defensive tackles especially hold up. The backup defensive tackles, I would think, would have an advantage against the number 2 defensive line. But that's been a group. I know we talked a lot about the numbers not being there, but the 4 that have played very well. I do want to add, I'm not sure about Jack Lamb's availability. I think that I think he might miss today's scrimmage. He turned an ankle. I think he rolled an ankle late in the week, so we'll see about his availability today.
There'll be a heavy rotation at linebacker regardless. I know that's been a point of emphasis for fans this spring. I think a guy to watch. You've been wanting to see Paul Moala. I want to see more Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa. You can watch both of them. It's allowed. They'll be heavily involved with no nickel, really.
I wrote about both of them today, so I want to see Usu-Koromoa too, because I think that he's a guy that gives you a lot of hope moving forward with that at that position. Certainly Moala is a tag team there, but it's Usu-Koromoa that they've invested the most in, and we know that Clark Lee the other day spoke extensively about Jack Kaiser, who we won't see today. That would have to fall into August, but an interesting position always at Notre Dame.
We don't have predictions. There's really no reason for that. There should be a lot of scoring today, but we will be back with post-game incident analysis, post-game columns, notebooks, and then plenty more from the 90th annual Blue Gold game.